Hey, welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Monday, January 8th, and coming off of a big weekend and heading back into another big week. Welcome, Travis Miller from Boiler Upload. Lots happening over the weekend, Travis, starting Friday night. Purdue with a game against Illinois, a game that we had much anticipated. Of course, a little bit was taken off of that with the situation with Illinois, but this turned out to be a game that was still close as Illinois has been playing well. The Boilers get a 5-point win, 83-78. Trey Kaufman ran the leading scorer for the Boilers, which has to be a positive sign for Matt Painter and the Boilers for it not to be Mount Edie.
Yeah, I think this was a really important game for Purdue because Edey picked up his second foul and he sat the last 8 or 9 minutes of the first half. And the lead was down to about 6 at that point. But Kaufman-Renn had best game of his career to this point. And I think that shows just how much of a team Purdue is, and that if Edey has to sit, they're still pretty good. I mean, you have Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are doing their things. Lawyer had the off game on Friday night, but you still got 17 points from Lance Jones, who, as a transfer into the program, I don't think his importance can be overstated, really. He has done so much since he arrived. He steps immediately into a starting role, and through 14, 15 games, he looks like he's been playing with these guys for 4 years. And that was what was critical. Purdue showed that it is still a really good team with Edey in foul trouble. He finished the game with 4 fouls, only 10 points, but he had 15 rebounds, and it was Smith, it was Jones, and it was Kaufman-Renn that really drove things against a really good top 10 Illinois team. Even without Terrence Shannon, they're still incredibly good. And Purdue was in control for most of the night. It got a little close late. There was a very questionable flagrant foul on Lance Jones that greatly benefited Illinois to get it closed. But in the end, Purdue was able to hang on and got yet another top 10 win.
Yeah, and then over the weekend, of course, besides that, Iowa beats Rutgers 86-77 at home. Wisconsin remains undefeated in conference play with an 88-72 win for the Badgers. But Indiana, let's see, Northwestern with a big win for them. They knock off Michigan State. Of course, that's at home, 88-74. But boy, Michigan State is still riding that roller coaster. Northwestern looking good. And then today, there are no games scheduled today. But right now, the standings find Wisconsin sitting alone at the top at 3-0, which, not shocking. We knew they were going to be decent, and it's still early in the season. And then there's a 3-way tie between Purdue, Minnesota, and Indiana of all. But I don't know what's more surprising, Indiana or Minnesota in that group right there right now at this particular time after what we had seen. But Minnesota, I'm going to go with Minnesota being the shocker, because not only is Minnesota in the top at the top of the Big Ten, New Mexico and Richard Pitino are also killing it right now. So it's just kind of weird how things work out for teams.
Yeah, and Minnesota's taking advantage. They had a pretty weak non-conference. I know they're going to probably have to win 12, 13 games to make the NCAA tournament within the Big Ten. But, they're off to a great start. You got to give them credit for what they're doing. They do not have Purdue at home this year. They only have one game against Purdue, which is going to be critical to, just rack up wins. And that is, unfortunately, the downside of Big Ten scheduling is you can rack up a lot of wins, but if you don't play some of the top teams, it kind of skews your record. It skews your computer numbers and everything. Whereas other ways, you could have a really difficult schedule and be a really good team, but you end up losing, 6, 7, 8 games because simply you're playing the top 4 teams twice. So it'll be interesting to see how things work out for Minnesota. I'm not sure who they have the rest of the way, who they play twice, who they play once. I do know they only get Purdue once on the road, so that's a likely loss, but you eliminate a second possible loss at home against a really good team.
Absolutely. And of course, coming up tomorrow night, Indiana travels to Piscataway to take on Rutgers, a place where they've had some problems playing, but this is not the Rutgers teams of the last few years. They're not quite as good. They're not quite as tough, although it's still a tough place to play. And this is a game that I think Indiana can certainly win and really need to win, because there are few games on the road in the Big Ten where you can sneak in and get one out. This, I think, is the time and place where you can make that happen because of the situation. But this is it's an important game for Indiana to keep winning games that you can, and I guess I hate to use the word should, but should win. They're not going to be a favorite, but they weren't a favorite against Ohio State the other day either. Ken Palm has picked them to go 1-7 in the month of January, which is a very, very poor outlook for not only for the Hoosiers month, but for their entire season. So this game against Ohio State was huge, but so is this game at Rutgers. It's really, really big for Indiana.
Yeah, you said it. It's so difficult to pull off wins in Big Ten play away from home. You can't take any of them for granted. Mostly because Indiana is just so good at home. I got to give them credit. They're going to be in every game at home, so they got to grab those wins on the road. They already got one at Michigan, and this certainly looks like it's a pretty winnable game on the road, just because I think you're starting to see the conference stratify itself a little bit. But even at the bottom, teams are going to be tough to play away from on the road. That's just the nature of the conference right now. I certainly didn't expect Purdue to lose at Northwestern, and look what happened. It happens all the time. I mean, one of my favorite things to say is Penn State has the worst but best home court advantage in the conference, because nobody is ever there. But it seems like at least once a year, a ranked Big Ten team walks in there and just completely falls asleep in the Bryce Jordan mausoleum, as I call it, and they end up losing because it's just like playing in an empty hangar and they just fall asleep.
Well, I know that. Where were you talking about? At Northwestern?
No, Penn State, the Bryce Jordan mausoleum.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's boy. It's
like
always
everybody's get somebody.
It was Indiana had some tough games there, but we will certainly find out. Purdue also with a game that they are favored in, I'm sure, at Nebraska, but Nebraska playing better. Nebraska has given Purdue problems on the road or at home before, and last year Purdue barely escaped out of there with a win.
Yeah, took him to overtime last year. Fletcher Lawyer kind of had the first huge game of his career. I think he had like 27 points, and it was a game where, to be quite honest, Purdue got a couple fortuitous foul calls on Nebraska and was able to stay in it and pulled it out in overtime. But that's a place that they sell out. They love the Cornhuskers. They've got really great support for every home game, regardless of how good they are. And
There's
Nebraska, like you said, is playing really
Nebraska.
Well. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, they're playing really well right now. I think that they're a tournament team out of the Big Ten. If as the way things are looking right now, we'll see how well things go through and the season plays out. But don't be surprised if they finish in the top half of the Big Ten and end up going to the tournament.
Well, like right now, you look at teams like Iowa, who I think is a decent team, but they're 12th in the Big Ten right now with a 1-3 record. Michigan State, who was thought to be probably the team to give Purdue the biggest run besides Illinois, they're 1-3. They're 11th in league play right now, and they're really struggling. Maryland, they're not as good as they were last year. I don't think that they're going to be as good as at home this year as they were last year. Penn State is in 9th. Then you keep moving up. There's Nebraska giving themselves hope with a 2-2 mark in the conference, 12-3 overall. Ohio State, Northwestern, as you move up, Illinois, and then Indiana 4th, Minnesota, Purdue, and then Wisconsin at the top. And just each and every one of these games are going to become so important because there has, I don't want to call it parity, but for lack of a better word, the Big Ten this year may have the biggest stretch of parity from, once you get past Purdue, Purdue's a dominant team, but Wisconsin is a team, they're not necessarily dominant, but they can beat you or pretty much anybody on a given night. After that, I don't know where it really goes, but the Nebraska, Ohio State, Northwestern, Illinois, Indiana, all those teams in the middle, man, that's going to be a churn. And that didn't include teams. If you have to go to Michigan State to play, I know that they're struggling right now, but going to play at the Breslin Center is always going to be tough. Going to play in Iowa City is going to be tough. So we'll certainly see. But Rutgers right now in last place at 0-3 in the Big Ten. Indiana almost has to win this game. You don't want to be the team that loses to the last place team in the conference.
Right. And, you were talking about the schedule there of who you've got to play on the road. That's where Purdue is right now. They still have to go to Illinois. They still have to go to Wisconsin. They've got to go to Indiana. They have to go to Rutgers, which has been kind of a nightmare place for them to play. I believe they've lost 3 in a row there. Zach Edey's never won a game at Rutgers. That is the last Big Ten arena he has not won a game in. So that's coming at the end of the month. Purdue does not have to go to Michigan State. That's like the one break that they have on the scheduling, but they got to go to Nebraska. They got to go to Iowa. So these road games, man, Purdue is not getting any favors, at least. And if they come out of that and they win the Big Ten at something like 16-4, 17-3, they will have earned it, honestly.